Very good afternoon to you all, Your Excellency, Mr. Minister, esteemed panelists. Thank you for coming to this really exciting event this afternoon. It's the launch of our APEX tool, which is the Advanced Practice for Environmental Excellence in Cities. My colleague Prashant will take you all through it, but I just wanted to stress the importance of this and why we're doing it. This is many, many years of hard work by our team, and I'm really delighted to say that we are now at a position to really launch this tool at scale. But why is it so important for us for this tool? Now, as economies continue to grow, the pressure on urban centers is going to get more and more. What happened in the last century, which was a century of industrialization, jobs were being created largely in industrial centers. These industrial parks were typically some distance away from urban areas. But now what we're seeing is the service economies in most countries are growing faster, and therefore jobs are being created in cities. Some numbers that I have is cities are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. I'm told 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, 75% of natural resources, and almost 50% of waste is generated from cities. So it's really going to be critical if you're going to take the climate challenge seriously that we focus on urban areas and cities. A number of cities have been doing a lot of great work already. Cities like Buenos Aires, Mumbai, Quezon City, Cape Town, Addis, Jakarta, Medellin, to name a few, have taken the lead. But we need to work together with them. So that's what our APEX tool aspires to do. But in order to sort a problem out, we first and foremost need to know the extent of the problem. So data is going to be critical. And that's where the APEX tool is going to help us, what is the baseline, where do we stand today, and when we know where we stand, then we can improve upon it. Then along with the APEX tool, we can develop action plans, and then those action plans need to be implemented. All this is going to take time. It's going to be a transition. But I also want to mention what is critical today is that countries that are trying to develop new cities can take the benefit of the APEX tool so you can build your city in a sustainable manner rather than build the city in a business as usual manner and have to then retrofit it to become sustainable. So, but what we need with your help, Your Excellency, Mr. Minister, is to try and convince governments to put in more money, and we get donor money and private capital to make our assets and our cities resilient to climate risks and therefore mitigate some of the losses that will happen. With that, I leave it up to my esteemed panelists and my good friend and colleague Prashant to take you all through what promises to be a very interesting panel. So thank you very much. Shukran and goodbye.
Thank you, Vivek. Very excited to be here. This is my sort of passion and interest over many years. So it's really exciting to kind of finally be here with this amazing crowd to kind of launch this product. You know, climate change is an important dimension. We have to tackle it. And cities, as Vivek pointed out, contribute 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions, right? But it's not just that will convince cities to move forward. They are rapidly urbanizing, especially in emerging markets. And one has to find a way to tackle not just the issues of global pollution in terms of climate change, but they have real issues like waste, like congestion, air pollution. We have to find a way to support our cities to make these things better, right? But the good news is, you know, actionable approaches to tackling these things that we call green city approach also leads to better climate goals. So it's an idea of combining the two rather than just only approaching it from a greenhouse gas emissions. If we can tackle it from the perspective of doing the right thing anyway, which is prioritizing transport, prioritizing waste management, prioritizing energy reduction and water security, you would get there anyway. Next slide, please. So the good news is it's not just a sad story of, you know, cities suffering, right? There is huge opportunities here in getting the cities right. For example, by having a clear strategy of having a green city approach, you're able to use the money more effectively. So it's a precious resource, in terms of what the city has. Knowing where to put it matters a lot. It can also help you attract better financing. So that's another angle that cities haven't really explored, and we are here to look at that in terms of green bonds or green, so sustainable linked bonds and other measures, and we can look at that. But fundamentally, it makes people feel better in terms of both physically, in terms of the well-being, in terms of air quality and traffic and congestion, but also a sense of pride, and attracting talent is an interesting dimension as well. Next slide, please. Now, so how do you go about doing this, right? There's some really interesting innovations that are happening all around the world, even in emerging markets. By itself, it may not be enough to make a city green, but there's some really, just take transport, for example. There's some really good example of bus rapid transport system in Curitiba. There are policy measures in terms of Singapore in restricting the number of vehicles in the city, and so on. So the question is, next slide, please. The question is, how can you take these evidence-based good practice approaches from all around the world to inspire existing cities for them to kind of get a sense of, will this work in my context? Can I do this? How much will it cost, and what difference will it make? Next slide, please. And with that in mind, we created Apex. We took sort of research from hundreds of cities in terms of what works and what doesn't work, how much it costs, and made it sort of fit in terms of being able to test these ideas out in any city around the world. The idea is that within sort of a few days or a few months, you're able to figure out your environmental footprint, and then are able to look at many measures to see what difference it makes. And the hope is the city is able to figure out, where are they in terms of their carbon emissions, what sort of things can make a difference, and more importantly, compare it with other cities as well. Let me show you with an example. Next slide, please. So what you see here is one screenshot of the tool itself, right? So what you're able to do is look at built environment, you're looking at transport, you're looking at waste and water, and the tool allows you to look at the whole space and aggregate it with emissions in mind, or look at it individually. In this case, in this screenshot, you're looking at the built environment. And here you can see very clearly where is the big energy going to be used, whether it's housing, whether it's commercial buildings, and you're able to see the growth, the BAU, it's the growth of the city over the next 10, 20 years. And then you're able to kind of choose things that you see on the left-hand side, the tick boxes. There are about 100 different ideas that you can choose from, and it tells you what reduction you can achieve from each of these cities. Next slide, please. And you'll see more of these the demonstration through the cities examples as we go further. You'll get a better sense of this. But a tool is only a tool, however sophisticated it might be. The idea is to kind of pivot that and really make some useful observations and useful outcomes from it. And so what we do within the World Bank Group, whether it's IFC or the IBRD, we are working with many cities to help them come up with a clear action plan. And you'll hear some of them from the various speakers here. And when the city already has an action plan, like some of the cities have a C40 action plan, we're able to come up with an investment pipeline and an approach to financing. I think the idea is that the hope is that if a city can understand what will it take to get to the destination, whether it's 50% reduction or net zero, in terms of list of ideas that will work, and then how much it'll cost, the next step is how do I finance this? And the tool and our collective efforts focuses on that for the next 4 months or so. Next slide, please. And here is kind of a journey, and we've been working with a few cities already, and we are interested in working with many more. The idea is to quickly figure out, using local data and peer embedded data inside the tool, to figure out, how can you review the city? What are the ideas that work? We've been working with the city themselves in terms of optioneering ideas. And then we produce a financing package as well as a roadmap to move forward. Next slide, please. These are some of the cities we've been engaged with, and you can see three that and Alexandria is here. We've got Ukulreni, perhaps, if they're able to dial in, and Medellin, dialing from Latin America, Colombia as well. But these are some of the cities we're working in. It's both IFC sort of engagements as well as the World Bank one, so it's kind of agnostic. And really, my last message here is that we're open to any city or, in fact, any government, whether it's a national government or regional government, to put forward their cities. And you can use this, to make your own priorities. You can nudge the cities to do the right thing. You can figure out, how do you incentivize how to do it, create competition between cities. We really are, this is a call for action to get more countries to come forward and make that sort of wish happen.
Es un gusto saludarlos desde Medellín. Mi nombre es Juan Esteban Monsalve, profesional del Distrito Especial de Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación de Medellín. Nuestra ciudad, que tiene un área aproximada de 376 kilómetros cuadrados, es junto con el área metropolitana del Valle de Aburrá la segunda aglomeración urbana más grande de Colombia, con cerca de 3,5 millones de habitantes. Nuestra ciudad es considerada, por tanto, un modelo de desarrollo urbano, destacado por grandes proyectos de infraestructura en materia de transporte, espacio público e innovación y políticas públicas eficientes y de alto impacto social. El Plan de Acción Climática de Medellín 2020-2050 ha sido desarrollado en colaboración por el Grupo de Liderazgo Climático de Ciudades, C40, y se desarrolla en torno a dos objetivos generales: mitigar el cambio climático y limitar los impactos y reducir la vulnerabilidad frente al cambio climático en nuestros entornos rurales y urbanos, ambos articulados y en forma consistente con el Acuerdo de París. Los objetivos y metas de mitigación del Plan de Acción Climático para 2020, 2030 y 2050 han sido planteados con base en la ciencia, con objetivos realistas, pero que exigen que haya una aceleración de parte de todos los actores presentes en la ciudad. A mediano plazo, nuestra meta es tener una reducción del 20% de las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero en 2030, con base o con referencia al año base en 2015. Y a largo plazo buscamos alcanzar la neutralidad en carbono en todo el territorio del distrito. El programa APEX de Ciudades Sostenibles nos ha ayudado a dar un paso importante en la aplicación de nuestro Plan de Acción Climática. La herramienta describe inversiones, políticas y soluciones de planificación específicas que pueden ayudar a alcanzar los ambiciosos objetivos de nuestro Plan de Acción Climática, así como los costes para el gobierno de la ciudad, el sector privado y la comunidad en general. Hemos logrado recopilar más de 20 acciones en los 4 sectores de APEX: entorno construido y energía, transporte y residuos y agua. Estas acciones no solo tienen beneficios climáticos en términos de reducción de gases de efecto invernadero, además aportan ecobeneficios que son importantes para los residentes de la ciudad, como el mejoramiento de la calidad del aire, la reducción de la congestión del tráfico y la mejora en la seguridad del agua. En conjunto, estas acciones forman una línea de inversión verde para Medellín. El análisis nos ha ayudado a explorar las opciones de posibles mecanismos y fuentes de financiación, que van desde la financiación pública hasta la participación del sector privado para apoyar la ejecución de diferentes tipos de medidas. Hay muchas opciones de financiación disponibles y estas se adaptan al contexto urbano único y a la experiencia de financiación de nuestra ciudad. El análisis también ha agrupado los proyectos para ilustrar un flujo de oportunidades de inversión potenciales entre las acciones y las fuentes de financiación. Esto puede ayudarnos a comprender cómo utilizar de forma más eficaz nuestros recursos para ejecutar proyectos y dónde podría tener más sentido trabajar con otras partes interesadas en la ciudad, como el sector privado, los servicios públicos y bancos locales. Por ejemplo, es importante que financiemos ciertos servicios públicos esenciales a través de nuestro presupuesto. Sin embargo, algún tipo de acciones como la promoción de paneles solares en edificios municipales, pues requerirá o permitirá explorar otras iniciativas como las alianzas públicos-privadas o modelos de energía como servicio. Más allá de nuestras acciones ambientales como gobierno de ciudad, el cumplimiento de los objetivos climáticos dependerá de acciones ecológicas de las empresas locales y los particulares. Habrá formas diferentes en las que el gobierno puede trabajar con partes interesadas para fomentar el desarrollo de estas acciones. Tenemos muchas opciones de aplicación que considerar, y un ejemplo es trabajar con intermediarios financieros locales para que las acciones de la ciudad sean asequibles para todos los residentes. Los bancos, sin duda, pueden ofrecer una financiación específica por vehículos eléctricos, hipotecas, paneles solares y financiación en construcción sostenible. Como ciudad, podemos apoyar este esfuerzo con campañas de promoción pública, asistencia técnica y programas de capacitación. De hecho, hay que señalar que en Colombia existe un sólido historial con este enfoque. Para terminar, me gustaría felicitar a la Corporación Financiera Internacional y al Banco Mundial por el lanzamiento del programa APEX Ciudades Verdes. Medellín se ha comprometido a tomar medidas contra el cambio climático y aspirar a la carbono neutralidad en el año 2050. Nuestro trabajo con la Corporación Financiera Internacional, utilizando APEX, nos ha ayudado a acercarnos a alcanzar nuestros ambiciosos objetivos de materia de cambio climático y hacer de Medellín un mejor lugar para vivir.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يعني في البداية سعيد بوجودي مع البنك الدولي ومسؤول البنك الدولي. بشكرهم على الجهود المبذولة في محافظة الإسكندرية على مدار العامين الماضيين. بكرر الشكر ليكم ولن أطيل الحديث لأن الحديث طويل جدا. لو اتكلمنا عن التغيرات المناخية والزراعة والصناعة والسياحة والتجارة هنتكلم ساعات كتير، ولكن هنكتفي بعرض بسيط من نائبة المحافظ الدكتورة جاكلين عازر عشان تقدم لنا عرض برزنتيشن بسيط بيوضح فيه الأمور اللي بتعانيها الإسكندرية وما نحتاجه في مدينة الإسكندرية خلال الفترة القادمة. شكرا لكم والسلام عليكم.
Good evening, everybody. At first, I'd like to deeply thank all the team of the World Bank for their great cooperation, as well as the Ministry of Local Development in Egypt for the enormous support. I'll take you in a short journey within the study that we carried out in cooperation with the team of the World Bank. Okay. The study covered both the mitigation and the adaptation aspects. Regarding the mitigation aspect, it started with the situational analysis of the current practices adopted by the city to tackle the climate change within the 4 sectors of the APEX tool correlated with their greenhouse gas emissions. As demonstrated by the graph, in case of no interventions are carried out till the year 2030, the greenhouse gas emissions of the city will be almost doubled within the 4 sectors. Then 2 scenarios were studied, either to reduce the emissions by 20 or 50%. Upon comparison and analysis, it was clear that reducing the emissions in Alexandria by 50% will lead to doubling of the emission savings in the 4 sectors of the tool, with less than 50% increase in the total cost. Several interventions were studied to fulfill the ambitious objective of the city, which led to 57% less energy use, 40% less private fossil fuel travel, and 46% less waste to landfill, and finally enhancing the water security by 24%. Next. The selected interventions were then prioritized according to the cost per greenhouse gas saved to allow better allocation of the financial resources. The bubble size in the display graph represents the greenhouse gas saving if 50% reduction is reached, while the vertical axis demonstrates the cost per unit saving. This graph highlights some striking interventions such as the solar cell technology and electric vehicle use, as well as their infrastructure. Next. The APEX tool helped us in evaluation of the interventions in terms of costs, risks, and benefits, and finally translate them into priority projects across the 4 APEX sectors: built environment, transportation, waste, and water. The APEX analysis paved the way for refining the list to 20 measures, with each of them defined by the greenhouse gas saving and its cost. Next. The chosen intervention were translated into main project for which Alexandria is looking forward to financing. The first one is the Alexandria Eco Park, which is an iconic project for the renewable energy that will lead to 13% of the greenhouse gas saving. And the other project is the electric vehicle minibus project. It represents an eco-friendly and cost-effective transportation compared to the traditional method. And this intervention will in turn lead to 4 to 6% of the greenhouse gas savings. Next. Adaptation and resilience are also greatly considered within the analysis of the APEX tool. This allows to understand how to address some of our largest climate risks, including flooding, water scarcity, erosion, and marine submersion. The criteria for selection of the interventions were the costs of inaction, the cost of planning, the capital cost, the annual cost of operation, and the benefits of actions in terms of the new jobs created, the reduction in injuries, and the enhancement of the property values. Next. The priority interventions that enhance adaptation and resilience were also translated into 3 main projects, which are the seismic early warning system, within which a map of the hotspots of vulnerable areas will be prepared with classification of the city into risk zones. Actions will be prioritized through consultation to include private investors, business associations in upgrading, revitalizing, and restoration of buildings. The second one is the Coastal Protection Project. This is an urgent need for expansion in such projects, which include breakwaters in endangered areas and nourishment to protect the shoreline, as well as protection of the residential areas. The third one is the water drainage network reuse. As His Excellency the Governor has mentioned, that Alexandria nowadays is carrying out a mega project for constructing a rainwater drainage network. The city is looking forward for the opportunities of engagement of the private sector in the implementation and management of this network, as well as the stations of reuse of water. Next. Finally, there are some planned actions and measures to enhance institutional and leveraging green finance. It goes without saying that integrating the climate risk and the emission reduction approaches in investment, spatial and economic planning system become a must, especially in detailed plans for expansion and unplanned areas. Additionally, enhancing assessment management and data infrastructure upgrading is the cornerstone. This will be achieved through establishment of the infrastructure network system center in the city with implementation of the new technologies such as the geographical information system and the artificial intelligence. All the previously mentioned actions will be emphasized through enhancing capacity for leveraging green finance and private sector mobilization. Finally, I'd like to affirm that Alexandria, the second capital of Egypt, is highly committed to the mitigation and adaptation measures to enhance resilience for the climate change, especially within the context that it is considered as the 5th endangered city around the world despite its minimal carbon emissions. Thank you.
السيدة نائب المحافظ، السادة مسؤولي البنك الدولي، السادة مسؤولي وزارة التعاون الدولي. السيدات والسادة الحضور، بداية اسمحوا لي أن أشيد بمستوى التعاون القائم بين الحكومة المصرية والبنك الدولي، وخاصة في مشروعات وبرامج الإدارة المحلية، حيث أن لدى الطرفين تاريخ من المشروعات الناجحة سواء في تنمية صعيد مصر أو في مجال إدارة المخلفات وتحسين نوعية الهواء في القاهرة الكبرى.
And now for the final word, I would like to ask Valerie Hickey, our Global Director for Environment, Natural Resource and Blue Economy from the World Bank, to say a few words to end the launch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prashant. And I will be very, very quick. I learned 3 things today. I took copious notes. The first is that cities matter. They matter because they're engines of economic development, but they're also engines of climate change. And that's why green cities matter more. And we know they're possible. Cities can become engines not just of reducing emissions, but of becoming places where green, resilient and inclusive development can matter, especially for those 2.5 billion people who are coming to the cities from the countryside in the next 10 years. But to make this work, partnership matters. And we saw a wonderful example today of partnership, not just between the World Bank and governments, but among governments. City government working together with national government, working at every level to talk and do diagnostics. It's what Apex does so well through the planning tool, to have a roadmap to turn those diagnostics into action. And that's something that Apex hopes to do with 100 green city action plans in the next few years. And finally, partnership matters for finance, to raise the billions of dollars that we know can come and turn cities into green cities. And that's not just private finance, it's not just international public finance, it's national public finance. And making sure not just that cities use their own finance to build themselves into green, resilient and inclusive cities, but that national governments make sure they're sending money through to cities and they're making sure that international public finance, including from the World Bank, can be used in cities to become engines of green, resilient and inclusive development. Thank you, everybody. Big thanks to Egypt, Alexandria.